Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Christopher Hall Training Podcast. We are going to be talking about exercise strategies and alleviating lower back pain. So this is something that I get asked all the time about. Number one, continuing with exercise. Number two, what exercises? And then in some respects, finally, it's how. How does this work? So what we're going to do is we're going to try and lay that journey out. First of all, is it good for you? What should you be doing? And how do you then go about implementing it without aggravating your lower back pain? Number one, it's all about understanding your lower back pain. So there's a few things that always needs to be done. And this is always done at the start of any of my online consultations or face-to-face consultations and workshops. The first thing is understanding that your lower back pain is specific to you, and then that leads on to you have your own specific triggers. So there are specific scenarios, specific postures that aggravate your lower back pain and make your lower back pain better. So that has to be understood first, which sort of takes you into assessing your lower back pain. Part of it's done via just the answering of questions, and again, this is done at the start of my consultation. This part is all free in the build up to it. My consultations are quite top heavy or front loaded in that there's a lot of work before you get into them. You've got to answer 3 questionnaires before you get there, and this is exactly the same with the face-to-face consultations, because I need this information to be able to do my job properly, and everything that I'm going to talk about in the following or following this comes from the questionnaire. So it goes through that questionnaire. What that does is that helps understand postures, positions, movements, loads. It helps understand when triggers are happening, how they're happening, why they're happening. Is it early in the day, late in the day? What are the patterns to your lower back pain? That's what we're looking for, are those patterns, and it comes out in the questionnaires. There's also one regarding exercise or about exercise, which talks about how often you do it, how intensely you do it, how long are your workouts, what types of exercises are you doing. And again, that helps build this whole picture, because that's what overcoming and alleviating lower back pain is all about. It's about the whole picture, because you can have a muscular problem, fine, and that needs, or you think it needs a bit of massage, that's absolutely fine. But if you've got a specific trigger that's triggering it and you continue to do that, then you will always need massage to overcome it, if that makes sense. Because you're just managing the symptom doesn't mean you're alleviating the cause. So what these questionnaires are all about is trying to gain an understanding of what's causing the lower back pain. When we can get to that point, what we can then start to do is start to reduce, eliminate the cause, which will then, over time, and that again is another important part that we'll come on to and speak about a bit more later, is the time that it can take. Because what you're essentially doing is, it's not a case of, again, as I say, you go for a massage, your pain is alleviated or reduced, and then it's like, okay, that's done now. I can go back to what I was doing before. It's not like that. Back injuries or back problems aren't generally like that. They will generally come and they will go based on movements, postures, positions, loads, exercise, things like that. So the better we can understand all these different things, the better it's going to be for your lower back pain, and alleviating it or minimizing it in the long term for your future, so you can get back to doing other things that you want to do. Now we can start talking about alleviating, which is what this podcast is about, is alleviating lower back pain. And the first thing you need to be able to do is start small. Certainly when it comes to exercise, we need to be able to start small. What we've got to be able to do, again, using these questionnaires, we need to start choosing things that you can do. Now that means starting with what you know. So if you know you can walk around your block without any pain, then there is a start. It may not seem like much, but you're starting to begin to be active without pain. And that's what we're trying to do, because the biggest part of this is winding down the pain, which is basically doing things that don't aggravate it. So we need to be able to start small. And if that means going for a walk around the block, do that for a couple of weeks. Okay, tick that box. I'm good there. Okay, let's add one exercise in. Let's do a plank. So I'll do a walk around and then I'll do 3 sets of a plank for 10 seconds. Okay, that's working. We do that for a couple of weeks. And the reason I say a couple of weeks is because that gives us a time frame to understand that it's working. Because some of the common things that I get people to look at is, number one, does it hurt or does it aggravate during the exercise? Number two, does it hurt or aggravate immediately after you finish doing the exercise? Because if it doesn't hurt during, does it affect it immediately afterwards? And if it doesn't affect it during and immediately afterwards, does it affect it sort of 24 to 48 hours after you've finished? Does your back feel a little bit tighter when you get up in the morning? That type of thing. Because if it does, you need to understand what's triggering it. So we need to start small so we understand the variable to work on. Because if we throw in too much too soon, we'll be thinking, well, was it the walk? Was it the exercise? Was it the stretch? Was it because I did it for too long? Was it because I did it too intensely? There's too many questions. But if we start small and we just do the walk around the block once, and that takes us 5 minutes, well, we know that the walk works. We know the pace that we did it for 5 minutes was okay. Possibly the posture was good as well. So we can start to think, right, all of that was okay. And there wasn't anything that's aggravating it. So if it did aggravate it, okay, did it, because it was 5 minutes, should I be doing 3 minutes? Should I be walking a bit slower? So then we can work on each of these things in the subsequent days, and then we may find a point at which, okay, well, we walked a little bit slower, we did the same block, but we walked a little bit slower, and that worked. Okay, so it was the pace I was doing it at. So again, you can start to understand all of these bits and pieces as we start small. So it's starting with some sort of activity and starting small. The next thing is continuing the assessment. And this is more now like a physical assessment. So there are basically 3 things that I ask people to assess. It's the lower back, it's the hips, and it's the core. So again, what we're doing is we're trying to understand, is there a weak link in the system? And is that coming from the lower back, the hips, or the core? Is it multiples of them? Because sometimes it's not always the lower back, although the pain is expressed through the lower back. Sometimes it can be the hip, sometimes it can be the core, but we have to understand where the weak link in the chain is. And by isolating all of these off, we can start to do that. From the questionnaires, you will start to build a picture of the postures, the positions, the movements, and the loads. So that will start to give us an idea. And that's essentially what we're doing, is we're painting this picture. We're starting off broad with just the very faint outlines and background. What we're then starting to do is add in the detail, build the picture, make it a much clearer picture with much greater detail. We're obviously not doing it on a canvas, but we're doing it through questionnaires and we're doing it through an assessment. So we're assessing the lower back for the physical postures, positions, movements, and loads. We're assessing the hip for the range of movement and the stability and how the muscles function around the hip. And then the core as well. Does the core have good stability? Does it have good strength? And does it have good endurance? And again, when we go through, once you've completed the questionnaires and we've got you signed up to the consultation, you then get access to the online portal where you can access all of these assessments. So you go through, you then send those results to me, and then I put all of this together in the big picture with the questionnaires, with the physical assessments. And what that then starts to do, that then starts to inform what we do next. So we may have started, and you may have started just with some small things. You know you can walk around the block. You know you can do a plank exercise or whatever. You know you can stretch a muscle out and it feels better. Okay, good. So we've started the process just by having an understanding of what everyday activities you can do. Because, and the reason I say start small first is because you've got to live life before we can go through a face-to-face consultation or an online consultation or see your doctor or see another therapist. You've still got to go through life to be able to do that. So you've still got to be picking up your shopping bags, walking upstairs, driving your car, walking to work, whatever it might be. So you've got to start small and understand what you can do within all of that to relieve your pain. So that's why we start there. We continue on with the physical assessment, which gives us a better idea of all those things that I talked about with the lower back, the hips and the core, the strength, the endurance, the stability, the postures that it likes and doesn't like. All of that goes into the pot. What we're then able to do is start to understand what we, in some respects, should be doing, can be doing, and want to be doing. So we're now going to come on to the sort of the ins and outs, the nuts and bolts of what I call exercise. Now, within exercise, what people think there is doing an exercise, a plank, a side plank, a bird dog, a bridge, whatever it may be, a squat, a hip hinge, whatever it may be. But what I'm talking about with regards to exercise is also foam rolling. I always put a / massage, because if you can get for a massage, then that can be helpful as well. Stretching, and then the exercises. All of those three things, I say, build up to what I call exercise as a group of things. So let's start with foam rolling. First of all, there are certain muscles involved, and again, a part of this will come out during the questionnaires and the physical assessment. So foam rolling, there are muscles involved. There are muscles of the hip, glute medius, glute minimus, glute maximus, piriformis. They are the main ones. The reason for those is because they have within them trigger points that give you the same or very similar symptoms to sciatic symptoms, i.e. sort of nerve type sensations going down the back and the side of the leg. So that can be mistaken for what is true sciatica, which is where the nerve root gets irritated at the level of the spine. So what we have to do is we have to understand, first of all, the muscles involved, and then where it's coming from. So they're the muscles of the hip. What we've then got are muscles of the lower back: longissimus, iliocostalis, QL, quadratus lumborum, and multifidus. So we've got all these different muscles. So we're starting to understand which are the sensitive muscles, which are the muscles that are going to be giving us giving us the experience of pain. So we need to understand that. Now, if we've got those sensitive muscles, it's going to be useful to desensitize them. So they could just be locked up nice and tight. They're really sensitive. Trigger points are activated. So that's where some sort of foam rolling or some massage can come in. Again, it needs to be done correctly. If you go too hard too soon, it's going to cause a problem. But if we can just work out the muscle tension, that's going to relieve some of the problem. Now, that in part could be doing a bit of the symptom, because the muscles could be tight via a symptom of weakness, poor endurance, or poor stability. But if we can take the sensitivity away, it then allows us to implement the cause. Because if the cause is a strength, endurance, or stability problem, but we've got laid on top of that real sort of sensitive, spasmodic, tense muscles, then we're only going to be laying strength, endurance, and stability on top of that, which is a shaky foundation. So what we need to be able to do is sort of reduce or remove that symptom, and as we remove and reduce that symptom, we can then start building in place proper strength, endurance, and stability. And that could be of the hip or the lower back or the core in and of itself. So we need to understand all these things, and we can start to get that from understanding the trigger points or the sensitive muscles within the lower back. And again, all the assessments are in the online portal. So when you complete the questionnaires, this is essentially the process. You complete the questionnaires, so you go to the website, enter your details, you get sent the questionnaires, you complete them, they get sent to me. Once I receive the questionnaires, if I don't receive them, I don't sort of do anything. But if I receive the questionnaires, I start to read through them, then I send you the dates of when we could get you booked in. Once you're booked in, you then get the access to the online portal and you go through these assessments that I'm talking about. So we go through and look at the muscle sensitivity from the trigger points and the tight muscles around the lower back and the lower and the hips. So that helps us understand what's going on in the area. And again, it informs what we need to do. Then comes into stretching. Now, what we find is stretching is a not contested, that's probably too strong a word, somewhat misunderstood. And basically, if we've got tight muscles of the lower back, it's not always a good idea to stretch them. Because again, as I mentioned, they could be tight for a reason. And by stretching them, you initiate what is known as the stretch reflex. So the ability of the muscle, when it loosens, to tighten back up again. Because as you pull a muscle and stretch it, you activate the stretch reflex, which is essentially the reflex that once it's longer, it shortens it again. The mechanism is different when we massage. So that can relax the muscle, and because we're not stretching it, we're not getting the stretch reflex, we're just relaxing the muscle through massage. So that's why massage can be useful for the lower back muscles. Again, that depends if it's the symptom or the cause. But again, as I mentioned before, we need to remove the symptom to be able to sort out the cause, if that makes sense. So again, there's a whole sort of process to this that needs to be built in the right way. So yeah, stretching the lower back isn't always that effective, but stretching the hips can be much more effective. Again, if this is where it's coming from. So what you do is, once you complete the physical assessment via the hips, which looks at the stability of the muscle and the range of movement of the joint, we can then start to understand what muscles need to be stretched, what muscles need stabilizing, and we can then start to understand what exercises and what stretches we need to put in place. So again, this isn't a one-size-fits-all method or strategy, if you will. This is specific to you, because when you complete the questionnaires and the assessment, it informs me what to tell you to do. It's not me saying, do this workout, do these stretches, do these exercises, because they've worked for 7 other people or 10 other people that I work with. This is what your body's telling me, and this is what I can advise you to do. And then what that does is that builds your unique program, if you will, for overcoming your specific lower back pain, as I said at the start. So we need to start stretching the hips if it's needed, if there is a range of movement issue there, because range of movement can aggravate and enhance pain in the lower back. There's also stability, so we need to work on the stability of the hip, which is how the muscles time. So again, if we've got tense, spasming muscles, if we can stabilize the area, which could be the underlying cause, we can then settle the muscles. So if we massage the muscles through with a foam roller or by a therapist, if you massage them through, they calm down. If you then start stabilizing the hip with exercises, when they're in their calm state, you can start building stability in. If they're tense and tight and spasming all the time, it's very hard to build stability in, because the body's unconsciously reacting already with its spasming muscles, and the exercises will have little to no effect. So if we can calm the muscles down and then build the stability in, that's going to be a more effective way of doing it, because the muscles are calm, they can learn this new stability or pattern or timing or whatever you want to call it. So we've got foam rolling, we've got stretching as 2 parts. Then we've got exercise. So as I've talked about from the core tests, we've got endurance, we've got stability, we've got strength, but there's also posture and there's movement in general. So as I've mentioned before, you've got your life to live. You've got to lift your shopping bags up. You've got to sit in your car. You've got to carry your children. You've got to walk to work. You've got to, sit at your desk, whatever it might be. So there are certain movements and postures that need to be modified, honed, enhanced, some reduced and eliminated, depending on whether they alleviate the pain or encourage the pain. So we need to get to grips with that, and again, that's something that can be started nice and early. But when it comes to specifically exercise, we're talking about endurance, strength, and stability. So let's start with strength. So the strength is the ability to get into a position and stay there for a short period of time. The endurance part is the ability to stay in that posture. So you need the strength to get there first, which could be just coming up into a plank. You can get up into a plank. There are some people that don't have the strength to get into a plank, a full sort of elbow to toe plank. So it might be start from the knees and come up. So they've got the strength to do that. What we then need to do is build the endurance in on top of that so they can get there and stay there. Once you do that from the knees, you can come out onto the toes. So you build that strength and endurance. So you can get up onto the elbows and the toes, and you can stay there for a period of time. So that would be your strength and your endurance. So we need to build that in. Again, what we need to be able to do is first of all reduce the pain, which comes from everything that we've done before. So it's not just a case of jumping this step. You have to follow these steps in some respects systematically. So what we've got is the strength and the endurance. The stability then is the timing of the muscle. Do they turn on at the right time? So again, one of the tests is to go up into a hand plank and lift an arm up. Then we need to understand, do your hips weight shift left to right? Do they roll from left to right? Or do they raise or drop? Because that's a sign of some degree of instability that needs to be addressed. So we need to be able to stabilize that. So when you lift that arm up, your hips don't move anywhere and they stay centered. That shows that muscles are timing properly and they're holding your body in the position that they are meant to be in without any adverse stresses going anywhere, because muscles can't hold the position. So once we've got those three in place, what we're starting to do is build this foundation. Now, again, what also happens when we talk about movement, within the online portal, there are all of this is within the online portal. So if we do it online, this is what I build in. If you come to see me face to face, I'm able to introduce all of this. We go through in the workshop what you need to then go away and do within the online portal, because unless you want to come back to see me weekly, that's absolutely fine, you can. But if you just need to come for the consultation in the workshop, you've then got the online portal to start working on at home. And then you can start doing that, and then you can come back for top-up sessions, or you can just have online support where I just sort of keep directing you, whatever it needs to be. All of that can be sorted out at a later date. But what we need to be able to do is, first of all, get the endurance, the stability, the strength in place. We'll also be working on posture and movement. And there are what I describe as fundamental movements: lifting, carrying, pushing, pulling, getting up, rotating, walking, running. There are little workshops in there to help you understand all of that. Again, like I mentioned, if you come to see me face to face, we'll start to go through this face to face, and then you'll have that information to be able to do online with the online portal. So what you've started to get there is an overview of how to build in your exercise program, and this principle of starting small then happens in everything else. Because again, some people that talk to me, they want to get back into a sport, but they're scared to do it because of their back. What we then need to do is the exact same principle of starting small and building slowly, which is essentially, if it's, or let's just say your sport's running, very simple sport. Obviously, other sports could be more complicated, windsurfing for one. But that's another conversation. So let's just start with running. So what we need to do, like we did with the walking around the block, you can build that up to a run around the block. And then again, you need to ask those same questions, and that's how you build it. Now, there is more to it than that, because again, we need to understand all the variables to get you there. But then we need to understand all the variables when you get there. Are they aggravating? Is it not aggravating? When is it doing it? During, immediately after, or 24 to 48 hours after. And we can then start building from there. But again, we've still got to start small, which is understanding what you can do or what you think you can do. Because something I always describe to people is, I sort of never say never about a task or a sport or something like that. It is just a process of when is the right time to start it. And that may be sooner rather than later, or it may be later rather than sooner. That all depends on the steps that come before. So it's all about building that back up in a sensible way. So the possibilities in some degrees are endless. We just have to get the process right, which is what takes the time. So this whole process could take a month. This whole process could take 6 months. This whole process could take a year. It all depends on your back pain and how diligently you work at it, and in some respects the original injury that you had. Because the more serious the injury, the longer it's going to take naturally. The less serious the injury, the less it's going to take, if that makes sense. So you have to understand all these different bits that make it all up to be able to give those types of answers. So hopefully this has been helpful. Hopefully it's given you a good summary of alleviating lower back pain and a good summary of exercise strategies for alleviating lower back pain. So many thanks for watching. My name is Chris from Chris for Whole Training. I'll speak to you in the next episode.